No, he got one.
You're a radio or something. Did she put the radio on? Does it turn it off? The radio or TV is on right now. Here? I can hear something.
On the right one.
No, it's something to do with. I have limited ability on that.
Sounds like the news to me. There's something about the Taliban.
Trying to get some like window. I will say where we go.
Brad's in his office.
Oh, yeah. In here?
Marianne.
Fred comes back.
Oh. We're looking up, we were trucking.
Hey, you want to sit right here since you're going to help at the beginning anyway.
You start banging on things, it works.
Down is up.
You got it?
I'm going to pick it up to you right at the beginning. So.
Are we good?
Right. You got it? Yeah.
You should have your next thing on that page now.
So I'm just while I'm working still on listen to it, and I think I might take my laptop and listen to it.
Participants, yeah.
Sound like Abby.
That's the outside, yeah.
That one, but the other one wasn't. All right.
Brad, are we set up for outside participants?
We did not.
All right, welcome everybody. This is the budget workshop, August, who's today? 17th. August 17th, 2021. Things have been a little crazy lately. Where did we start?
Mayor Deambra,
Here.
Vice Mayor Stone,
Here.
Councilmember Brandon. Here. Councilmember Prince,
Here.
Councilmember Young. Here.
Mr. Allen, this is your show this evening, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. So the way that if it pleases the council, we'd like to do kind of an overview of our general fund first. And then Mr. Hammond has a presentation for the water utilities and stormwater utilities. And then we'll take a little bit deeper dive in some of the strategic initiatives. And from there, we'll see the questions and, comments and take a little deeper dive if you guys want. So if you guys will allow us, Hugh is going to kind of start off with an overview of the general fund. Then I'll kind of jump in here about halfway through, and then Mr. Hammond will jump in with utilities. And then at that point, we maybe stop for questions and then dig into the initiatives or however you want to handle that.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. We would just like to thank you for the opportunity to present to you the village's fiscal 2022 budget. The budget for the upcoming fiscal year is estimated to be, and hopefully I can advance this.
Down is up.
So as the slide pretty much reflects, everything that we do with our budgeting is rooted in the core values for the village, which are depicted there. And the manager has enumerated these several times, and which you'll be going even deeper into this evening. But before I go further into that, I'm going to kind of make a quick shift to the actual budget itself. And okay, so the overall budget for the upcoming fiscal year is estimated to be a bit over $30 million, and it's comprised of 8 total funds. And the 2 largest of which are the general fund and the water utility fund. Combined, these 2 funds make up approximately 90% of the village's total budget. The budget for the upcoming year increased from $23.9 million to $30.7 million, an increase of $6.8 million or 28.41%. The lion's share of this increase is reflected in the 2 funds previously mentioned, the general fund and the water utility fund. For the general fund, the increase of $1.2 million is primarily attributable to planned spending of the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, as it's commonly called, ARPA funds of $1.1 million, which we plan to expend those funds. Just as a footnote, we expect to receive a total of $3 million as a result of the ARPA Act. We'll go further later into the details of the various expenditure line items, but before we do so, I would like to look at the next fund, which I previously mentioned, which is the water utility fund. That fund has an increase of $5.3 million as depicted there in spending, which is largely attributable to planned capital projects. The budget for the most part is fairly constant, those funds reflecting significant changes from the previous year. In example, the CIP fund, which is a capital improvement fund, acronymically, the capital projects fund, and the special law enforcement trust fund owe their increases in their budgets to additional fund balance reserves brought forward from the previous year. Now we will kind of take a little more detailed look into the village's largest fund, the general fund. So the general fund revenues, our largest revenue source, ad valorem taxes at a fairly reasonable increase, but that increase was blunted by a decrease in estimated lease purchase proceeds, as well as decrease in administrative fees from the water utility fund. The next slide here gives a kind of a graphical representation of the overall revenue budget of $15.2 million for the general fund. And the largest revenue source, which was indicated earlier, is the ad valorem taxes. The general fund budget by department, most of the departments have a fairly reasonable increase, most of which are rooted in personal services. The major variances will be discussed in our budgetary highlights for the general fund shortly hereafter. And another graphical representation of the expenditures. And so overall, if we look at the trending aspect of the general fund expenditure, we see that the expenses, if we look at it by expense classification, it depicts a fairly consistent increase over the years. Overall, personal services expenditures increased by about 2.85%, while operating expenditures increased by 15%, owing largely to some one-time expenditures, which we will highlight in the upcoming slide. With that, I will turn it over to the village manager, who will discuss the budgetary highlights for the area funds. Thank you.
Just some of the major revenue source, some of the highlights. So as you guys know, with the last budget meeting, we have no planned increases in millage rate. The increase in taxable value properties went up 5.63. The actual revenue that we received from that went up 6.1%. Here in this plan, when we put together the budget and it's in your packet, the rescue funds were planned at 1.1 million, which is half, 50% of what we were expected to get. However, with the new census numbers that have come out, we have been notified that we'll be receiving 3.074 million. And so it'll be $1.5 million. So we get roughly half now, probably in the next week or two. We have signed the funding agreement for that, and so that's moving forward now. And so it'd be 1.537 million, and then in 12 months, as long as we receive and use the money properly, we'll get the other allocation, the other 50% in 12 months. The other highlights: decrease in administrative fees. We've talked about this a little bit. So we receive administrative fees into the general fund from water, the building fund, and it's based off of number of employees, basically the use of the general fund services like human resources and finance. And so there's a formula that goes with that. This year, with decreased expenses in the water fund, you'll see a decrease in administrative fees to the general fund. And partly was that with $1 million that we had set aside to do the water meter projects, that really boosted the expenditures last year, which raised those administrative fees. We are seeing the increase in the state revenues coming back to what we call par, or back to the pre-pandemic levels in the state shared revenue. That's why you see the increase in those. That also increased the infrastructure surtax. The decrease in capital lease proceeds, like the sand project, is not included in this budget, and then the decrease in state grants. We had 2 of them last year for $50,000 each. Some of the highlighted expenditures. So our personnel service expenditures, increase in salaries and wages, $216,000. Increase in health insurance costs of $57,000. We do have salary increases for CWA of 3.02%. The police PBA 3%. Fire is projected at 3% with the steps, and the non-union is 3%. We do have a decrease in employee pension contribution, as you guys heard from our pension representative the other night, $73,000. So that'll be a decrease in expenditures. And then we are planning to move forward with code compliance, a part-time position. It'll be funded by Jupiter Inlet Colony. They're going to give us the offset of that of $20,000. So they're paying us $20,000, allow us to have another part-time employee for that to help offset that. And then we also have planned the business liaison and special events personnel that will be funded out of the ARPA funds of $85,000. And we'll go over the ARPA funds in a bit. Other expenditures or other highlights, the corridor study in this budget is funded for $100,000. I have received, I guess, a generic proposal. At this point, we haven't got the official proposal from Treasure Coast for 105. So we will have to make that adjustment moving forward. The Tequesta ball fields, I know we've had some conversation about Tequesta Park. We do have $30,000 budgeted to try to improve those fields with the, putting in clay, fixing the grass, fixing the infields, and even the dugouts. We have some grant money set aside for Paradise Park, Remembrance Park. I have a note in here to talk about those two grants as we get in kind of the initiative part of it. And then we also have $75,000 in here for Remembrance Park for the drawings. Of course, we still need to take a couple steps before we get to that part with the construction drawings, but I know that this council has asked for some movement on that project, and so we can talk about that when we get a little deeper into the initiatives. The debt service for the new community center, as everybody knows, that's online now, and so we have the debt service of $345,000 a year that we need to fund. The capital projects, you'll see that a big portion of the capital projects is funded through the ARPA. So we had 4 vehicles planned with capital projects. The ARPA funds allow us to purchase those vehicles. So our plan is to purchase those outright using the ARPA funds. The replacement of the capital command vehicle for fire rescue, that's also an allowable expense. And then with the ARPA funds, we're going to transfer $359,000 for road improvements. That's part of the lost revenue that we were able to recognize through the ARPA funds. So this is kind of a summary or 3-year plan for the ARPA. You need to spend it, and I don't have the years, but roughly you need to spend it within 5 years. So you need to have it at least allocated or what's the word I'm looking for? Obligated within 3 years. And so this is our 3-year plan for it. You can see some of the lost revenue that we're able to recognize based on their formula. We also have, the expenses for economic impacts, lost revenue, some of the broadband infrastructure. We have some money going towards stormwater projects for 3 years, as we talked about some of our needs in the stormwater. And so you kind of have a 3-year, and we can come back to some questions with that if you guys have those in a couple minutes. The millage rate history, just to kind of show, we've had a pretty steady millage rate over the past. Back in 2009, going into 2020, we did raise it 6.629. It is projected to be there for the 3rd consecutive year. Moving forward, we don't have any planned millage rate increase. Just to show you kind of where Tequesta sits in Palm Beach County, that's based off of the last years, but we're right in the middle. The census number is not reflected on here, but our millage rate is very competitive in Palm Beach County. I guess this is the one that we've talked about on multiple occasions, going back to 2017, seeing our fund balance below 2-month operating. Staff has worked extremely hard, and I commend our staff for really holding the lines on this, trying to get us back to 2-month operating. And so this year, at the end of this year, in September, we're projecting to be $158,000 over that 2-month operating, which is great. I know kind of our next site is to try to get to a 3-month operating. Is kind of the norm, the standard. And so that would be our next goal. We'll bring a policy to council in the coming months for you guys to approve that policy to try to raise that to a 3-month operating. The building fund is a healthy fund. I know we've done a great job in the building department with bringing in revenue. Our budget for the building fund, and as you guys know, this is a separate fund, a restricted fund. It can only be used for building. We're estimating $500,000 in permit fees. With our budget of $676,000, we're projecting to use $171,000 out of fund balance reserves. And you have the breakdown. So so using the 171 is, we have reserves of $825,000. What's noted about that is if we don't use the reserves within 4 years, 4 years or 5 years,
4 years.
4 years, we have to give those funds back. So using the fund balance out of that, it is allowable use and something we should probably do. And then as we get closer where we start running out of those reserves, we obviously adjust what we're doing in our permit fees and that. But right now, it's a very healthy fund. Jose does a good job, very physically responsible within his department. Couple other governmental funds we talked about: capital improvement, the capital projects fund, the special law enforcement fund. So the capital improvement fund, and we'll go take a deeper dive on what this fund looks like over a 5-year period. We have the ARPA funds, $359,000, the pathway sidewalk improvements. We'll go over what that project is that we have set aside for sidewalks. Then we have a capital projects. We're going to transfer to capital projects fund of $72,000, and then we have a capital replacement cost of radios of $15,000. And so we're projecting this fund to actually, with the revenues that we bring in for the surtax, the 1 penny sales tax, and then the utility tax, to actually have $186,000 that we'll be able to carry over into the next year. The capital projects fund is the 255, and it's separate this year. The 255, it was built into the money that we borrowed. And so it's in a separate fund, but we also have the 359 that you've seen before, plus the 255 is what we have allocated for roads this year. And then you got the furnishings, and then the software for recreation management for the new center coming online. This is a special law enforcement. As you know, it's a restricted fund. We can only use it for certain things. I have asked the chief to kind of put together a plan for how he wants to spend it. This will have to be changed because, as you guys know from Thursday's budget, you guys did approve somebody donating money for the gym equipment. So you'll be taking this 104 minus the $30,000 out. But these are some of the expenses that the chief will be utilizing this fund for that falls within the state statutes of allowable uses. Just kind of the balance of these funds. This was the 186 at the bottom is what we plan on transferring over. So at the end of this year, with the expenses in roads and sidewalks, we'll have a balance of $436,000 in that surtax capital improvement fund. So a couple of the other funds that we have, and I'm about to hand it over to Matt. So just warm up, Matt, while you're in the bullpen over there. The refuse and recycling fund, we'll talk a little bit about that. We have the budget is $530,000, no major change in operating. Waste management did go up on their fees this year per contract, and so there will be a 3.5% increase to those. The actual fund at the end of the year will be $62,000. You will see that with the increase, we still are taking $28,000 out of that $91,000. So we'll continue to look at that fund, making sure that it remains on the positive side. And so next year, meaning the 22-23 year, we'll be looking at those fees again moving forward. So with that, that's the general fund. I would like to turn it over to Matt, do a presentation. I know his is a little quicker than ours. And then at that point, we can do some questions if you prefer, Mayor or council. But Matt, if you want to, I'll see if I can get you up. Here's your clicker. If you want to sit here, I'll stand up.
All right. I like how Jeremy set the expectation and said this one's quicker. No, it should be. So just a quick overview. The utilities department does cover 2 enterprise funds. 4 things to note is that with enterprise funds, in general, the revenues that come into the fund must stay within the fund, with a few exceptions. there's been a lot of work that's gone in the last couple of years into system assessment and long-term capital planning. And I know a priority of the council has been moving forward with some long deferred capital improvements such as the asbestos cement water main replacements, well field rehabilitations, etc. And so as a result, this budget cycle, there was a focus on being fiscally conservative on the operation and maintenance side, while ramping up the implementation of those planned capital projects. Starting with revenues on the water fund, these revenues include or implement the 5-year rate resolution that was approved in April. The projections are a bit conservative. The demand for water is a bit of a demand curve for water, so a bit irregular. The indoor or essential uses, it's pretty inelastic, but the outdoor discretionary usage is fairly elastic. And so what we saw last year was there was a pretty big dip after the immediately after the months of the 3 months of estimating on the bills. That usage has rebounded the last 6 months, but that long-term water demand is still a little bit yet to settle out and be seen. And so that's why there's a bit of conservatism in the water sales portion of this. You'll see on the let's get cut off a little bit. We did have several large development projects that came in. So there was nearly $500,000 in connection fees that came into the.
I did it a while ago. I'm not sure how I did it.
There we go. So yeah, that was the Sea Glass, Crystal Cove, and the reserve projects all came in. Connection fees all came in and are in varying stages of planning and construction. There aren't any known or planned large projects like that coming in, some smaller ones, but that's why there's a fairly big dip in those development capital connection charges, and that generally tends to be lumpy and follow the economy. When you factor out those capital connection fees, revenues are projected approximately 7.2% increase over the projected revenues for this current fiscal year that we're in. On the expenses side, we're anticipating or proposing a 1.8% decrease in operating expenses. That's due to some of the larger recurring but non-annual maintenance costs that we took on this current fiscal year that aren't seen or we aren't planning on in the next fiscal year. The numbers are asterisks because there are a couple minor adjustments that'll be in the final budget or the final budget book as there's some costs that have been pretty volatile, particularly chemical costs that we're trying to nail down that we have a pretty good idea of now. And then a couple other minor things like employee coming in requesting tuition reimbursement. There is a large increase in capital in R&R, and that's going back to implementing that planned long-term capital improvement plan. What's not shown in here are non-cash expenses like depreciation, amortization, and you will see a decrease in the financing cost because there's a 2004 series banknote that expired or was decreased the fiscal year that we're in right now. Slicing those expenses from a little bit different angle, there's a couple things to point out. There's an increase in the customer service expenses, and that's due to a part-time position being shifted to full-time to provide a little better coverage and support and service at the front desk. And then Jeremy had already touched on the transfer to the general fund, which is based on the calculation of the operating expenses. Shifting over to the stormwater fund, Revenues implement the fiscal year 22 rate resolution that was passed in July. Also included in there are $150,000 in ARPA funds, and what we're planning on, hoping to be able to get again, is $30,000 from grant funds from FDEP. The expenses side of things, the utility fund, or the stormwater side, we're shifting from the last year and a half of triage, really addressing some immediate emergencies. We're shifting from triage to addressing, call them planned procedures, with making steps towards proactive maintenance. As a result, what you'll see is holding very steady on operating expenses, while still making some important investments into capital and R&R, but not nearly the same level from the previous fiscal year, which was, or the previous 2 fiscal years, which were addressing some pretty pressing emergencies from storms that came through. We are projecting a $45,000 increase in the fund balance this next fiscal year, which again is going to be an important part of the next few years, as that fund balance is, while there still is a fund balance, building that back up to a healthier level. As I mentioned, a big part of the budget on the utility side are the large capital projects that we're moving forward with. That includes the water main replacement projects, water treatment plant upgrades, superficial well replacements, and rehabilitation of 3 of the 4 upper Florida aquifer wells. Highlighting a little bit more on the water main replacements, the 2, or I guess 3, 2 of them are grouped together, but the 3 that are planned to go into construction next fiscal year are Tequesta Drive, south end of Country Club Drive, and phase 2 of Beach Road, which will finish out the AC pipe on Beach Road, and beginning design on Jupiter in the Pines South, which is south of Tequesta Drive, Jupiter in the Pines South, and then Country Club Drive North. And to revisit a little bit on how those were grouped and prioritized, they were grouped into bite-sized chunks that can be reasonably implemented, and prioritized based on age, condition, and its risk and importance within the system. Moving over to water treatment plant upgrades, there are improvements to the disinfection system to improve process control and reduce the chemical use at the facility, both ammonia and sodium hypochlorite. Process improvements to improve resiliency. That includes the high service pumping station, adding a bypass around one of the ground storage tanks that's not able to be isolated. Some important instrumentation control upgrades. I don't think many of us have computers that are 15 to 20 years old, but we have PLCs that are essentially computers that are still running the plant, that need to be important to be upgraded for compatibility, and also just from a risk perspective, it's difficult to find replacements for those at this point. There is a project in here that's not reflected in the budget, but I wanted to bring it up and make you aware of it. An important part of one of the studies that we're wrapping up was identifying areas where we can improve energy efficiency at the plant. And so there was a pretty big project that increases the efficiency of the membranes. Membranes as membrane technology as a whole is a very energy intensive process. It's one of the largest O&M costs at the plant. That said, the process that we have is a 20-year-old process, which works fine. But there are improvements that have been made to reduce the energy costs of those, to be able to recapture energy between different stages of the membranes. And one of the things that we pressed our consultant on was, we're not doing projects just for the sake of doing, energy efficient projects. They've got to be able to stand on their own. And so we leaned on them hard to get accurate costs, and then look at those from a financial perspective of, does it make sense to move forward with these? The capital cost for the membrane energy efficiency improvements, it's about $2 million, including the design consulting fees. It's projected to reduce energy costs by $105,000 per year. To take a look at that on an apples to apples basis, or on a basis to be able to say, does this make financial sense to us? Look at that from a 20-year net present value on what are our energy costs. What are our energy costs? What is the potential? What are our potential increases on the FP&L rates, etc. Boiling that down, this project has a 20-year net present value of about $185,000. It's a net positive for the village. It's not a hey, it's $1 million net positive project, but it is a positive net present value for this project. It reduces, or is anticipated to reduce, the carbon footprint of the plant by 144 tons of CO2 per year.
That's a lot.
It's a significant amount. Looking at it, those calculations are only, that net present value analysis is only as good as the assumptions that go in. And so I always like to take a look and do a sensitivity analysis and say, what if we don't get 105? What if we don't get 105,000? What do we still, what savings per year? What do we need to get and have this still be viable, make sense? And then from the other perspective, there's the assumed increase in electrical FP&L cost. What if that doesn't happen? That changes the mix. And so the answer to those are, all else equal, if the project achieves 90% of the energy savings, it's still a net positive for the village. If FP&L's average annual increases are 2% or more, it's still over the next 20 years, it's still a net positive for the village. I looked up the 5-year rate increases. It's for the next 5 years, what FP&L has in front of the state is an average of 3.2%. I think it's about 10% in there, or almost 10% in this next year, and then a little bit lower over the next 4, but it averages 3.2 over the next 5. So it's a project that's not in the draft budget, but it was one that I wanted to bring before you. It's the plant's going to operate fine without it, but it is an option that's there to reduce our energy consumption. But it comes with a capital cost. It appears that, based on everything that we have, it's a net positive for the village. It's not a $10 million net positive for the village, but it is a net positive project financially for the village. So a little bit long-winded on that, but I wanted to make you aware of that, walk you through. Stormwater side of things, major capital projects are in this next fiscal year: lining of 2 sections of stormwater pipe between River Drive and Gulfstream Drive, and then over on Riverside Drive, a backlot pipe. We also have some detention pond repairs that need to be addressed, one on the Riverside up near the road, some bank repairs on North Cypress Drive that are starting to encroach on a structure, a home, and then some right-of-way improvements on Gulfstream Drive and Riverside Drive to take care of some nuisance ponding that's been an issue. with that, I don't know if I was a little bit shorter or not, but
So I guess, from this point, it'd probably be maybe the easiest if you guys have specific questions for Matt on utilities. We can kind of, I guess, I don't want to say turn him loose, but relieve him of that. So it might be easier to stay with that before we dig back into the general fund with specific questions.
No, I would agree with that. And, there's a lot to do, so, Molly, come on, so do.
I found out, so next. Sorry, I'm telling you.
I started on the right side of the first. Bruce.
You always like starting with me, don't you?
I started with Molly. She
I'm
just
gonna sit back and eat a cookie, and I'm gonna let you walk for a while, and I'll die anyway.
So are you saying you want to, you're referring?
Yeah, I'm referring to
I'm
that.
sorry. When you're talking about the membrane efficiency.
Yep.
Who else uses that? Who else has gone ahead and installed that? Are we the very first?
no, it's pretty much the standard for new, if you're building a new membrane facility. It would be converting the, instead of solid, essentially, just starters for the membrane feed pumps, which are large, the 300 horsepower pumps. That's the biggest energy consumer at the plant. Converting those over to variable frequency drives to match the, to be able to match the exact membrane feed pressure. Putting in smaller interstage booster pumps that takes relieves energy consumption off the large membrane feed pumps. That's a standard. Again, both of those are standard for new new membrane pumps. And then the biggest is actually pressure exchange devices that takes the when you drive the water across the membranes, you've got this high pressure to be able to drive water through the membranes. You have the clean water on one side, you've got the concentrated water on the other side. That concentrate has a lot of pressure to it, rather than just wasting it and allowing it to dissipate as you send it out to your disposal. You're actually capturing that energy, and directing it back towards the head of the membranes. Again, relieving pressure, relieving energy consumption off the membrane. So those are the three items.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify who would be the first ones, because I know a lot of times the first things being installed, there's always tweaks you got to figure out. And
Yep.
I always like to learn from others, things they've been through.
It's always good to be on the leading edge, but not the bleeding edge.
Yeah, you have a lot of projects in the next year.
We're busy. We're busy now, and it's not going to slow down.
This isn't a money question, but since you were bringing up the water mains, especially on Country Club Drive and on the north end, it'd be great if you achieve that next year. What kind of takeover on the road? Because that's going to fall into the detour next year from the bridge traffic. So when you're working on that project, we're gonna have to slow down to one lane. Is it just you guys on the side? Have we taken into account just being aware of that construction type setup?
So I can speak a little bit more in detail on the south end, which is is planned to start construction next year. That replacement water main is planned to be on the west side of the road, within the right of way, but outside of the edge of pavement. There will be the services going across the road to serve the homes along that side. Those are planned to be bi-directional drill, so they'll be drilled under the road, so there won't be.
So in the middle of the road, take it.
That's right. So I can't say that there won't be any lane closures, but they'll be minimal and short-lived.
Okay. Specifically, I'm always very cautious when we add positions and staffing, making sure that we don't have someone already that can't do the job. When you talked about taking a part-time position and making it full-time, that increases on all levels, whether it's benefits and hours and this and that. When it relates to customer service, is that gonna be someone just answering phones for more hours, or is it gonna be someone that can actually take some action to help in customer service? Someone to make decisions on your behalf while you're out doing your job?
So the position is actually one that was filled earlier this year. So if you've met Miss Kathleen in the afternoons up there, that's the position. It's not, we're not hiring somebody new. She spends half of her time working with and supporting Janet in administrative functions, a lot of processing invoices, etc. Her time up at the front service desk is spent while she does help customers. She cover breaks and help customers who call in or walk in. What it also does is allow us to be able to. One, she spends a lot of time on accounts receivable. So she's been spending a lot of time working through contacting customers who haven't paid in a while prior to having to shut them off. And two, while she doesn't do this, it relieves some time from myself and Dennis and Lee to be able to do that, to be able to contact something that was important to me that we've been doing for the last more than 6 months now, is following up on customers that have potential leaks and proactively contacting them to notify them and provide assistance on.
Okay, I'm just an advocate of all positions that we have, make sure that they're efficient and that we're not just adding things for.
If I can add just one thing, so this position isn't necessarily a new position, like Matt was saying. We had this position before with COVID and all that. There was some layoffs. This particular position was laid off. We brought it back as a part-time, seeing if we can do it on a part-time basis. You know, we had a little bit of turnover in a short period. We felt this would heal some of the holes and needs, and so I was convinced that the full-time should have been kept. So we brought it back this past year, and I say back, and it was never eliminated, but we were trying to, have less staff. So it's not a new position is what I'm getting at. We just kind of repurposed it, gave some different responsibilities to hopefully be more efficient.
That's all I got for right now.
So the 144 tons of savings energy on that project.
Yep.
There's a lot, which is great. The pumps that you mentioned, the 3 different areas, how long would those pumps was the lifespan?
That was specifically why I chose a 20-year net present value. That's when operated. That's the anticipated lifespan of the equipment that's being put in.
So basically, a break even financially, for the most part, potential for a savings if everything lines up.
Yep.
And I think you're conservative on your estimate too, so it could be a term investment at the earnings, but still good positive on the energy side. So,
correct.
Other than that, you feel like your budget is something that you can get behind, stay behind, or is there anything out there that's like, man, I wish I had this?
No, I feel like the budget that's here is it's appropriate. It's making needed investments into, I think, radically funded on the operations side, and I think that it involves implementing needed investments on the capital side that are also, well, maybe a little bit of a stretch, reasonable to accomplish in the time frame with the staffing that we have.
I've got a couple of questions to start a little bit. What percentage of our cost that is in percentage of energy is our basic cost?
Oh,
okay, we don't have to.
I can get back with you on that. I don't want to shoot from the hip.
Well, have you ever thought about, with the solar technology and stuff that's available today, and we're seeing FPL, which we buy our power from, investing hundreds of millions of dollars and stuff in solar panel fields and stuff throughout the state of Florida. There's multiple, facilities throughout. have you ever kicked around the idea of some of the space that we've got at some of your facilities, stuff where we could actually put in our own solar panel power field and offset some of our energy costs over public power?
It's an option. The shorter answer is no. We haven't dug in deeply on the solar side. The most likely location would be some of the available real estate at the plant.
Right.
Outside of obviously rooftops. It might encroach a little bit on what some of what the police department uses on occasion in the back there with some of their trainings, but we would work with that if that needed. But no, the short answer is no. I don't know it'd be something we have to look into to see if it's a viable solution for us, if it makes sense from a financial perspective. We are biting off a very doable, but a significant capital chunk that a lot of it is funded through a lot of it is proposed to be funded through low interest debt. And so that would have to be factored in. But it's something that it is the pleasure of the council. It's something that we can look into.
Yeah, I would think there might be a possibility of having some grant money available for that type of new technology. I think everybody's trying to be conservative with fuel costs and stuff like that. You were talking about the pumps, Kyle, earlier. They've got, I'm telling you where they've got some brushless pumps out now. We can get away from the brushes and the longevity of the pumps and stuff are quite significant compared to brush electric motors and stuff. You familiar with those?
So to switch over, there's specific motors that have to be that are needed in order to switch over to variable frequency drive. They're specifically, I think they're called NEMA MG1 inverter duty rated motors that are what they are that are used for VFD, but they are the standard copper wound squirrel cage motors. I think is what they're specifically called. Okay.
Yeah, so the only question I had was, you had in your projection on the energy and return for having that tonight. And I'm just going off the strategic initiative side on the agenda. You had 3.2 for final plan construction of the upgrades and the energy resource improvement. So you said on the screen at 2 million something. Is that just construction and what's the rest of the 3.2?
So that includes both the if I switch back a slide.
I can go.
So that includes the construction of all of those. So that would be both the
Okay, so 3.2.
the 3.2 includes the construction of the membrane energy efficiency improvements and the upgrades, the 3 bullets above that. That's all included.
Bruce said on a couple of my points, which I was going to ask about grants, so I was going to ask you about the possibility of solar as well. And obviously, you need to do an analysis somewhere which would have been ready to determine whether that would be worthwhile. But I agree, it's something that probably we're taking a look at. Just to see what the benefit might be. We talked about grants for solar. I know we talked about the distribution system, looking at the grants as well. I don't know if there's anything that we uncovered that must be out there that would assist that process. But is there anything at this point in time, or are we still at a point where we're just going to have to sell
the one that I'm watching most closely, there are standing grants that are out there for water systems that are under consent orders from a water supply perspective, which we are not. So if you had contaminated wells, there's grants state grants out there for that, as well as for economically disadvantaged communities, which we would not fall within. The one that I am looking or keeping a very close eye on on the federal side of things, on the infrastructure bill that's planned. So that may open up some If they feed that all through the the state revolving fund program, without any new capital offsets, then it wouldn't apply to us too much. But if they do open that up to grants for, you mentioned the things that improve energy efficiencies, that would be that one would be a most likely possibility for that they would want to earmark and encourage through federal grant dollars.
But at this point, we're presuming we're gonna have to self-fund, and our plans are based on a self-funded approach, but if those grants were to materialize, obviously.
It is, but we've been pushing our consultants to have shovel-ready projects, so we're able to strike if needed. We're not waiting while we're designed for 9 months, and then when they come out, at least a little over a decade ago, when those stimulus dollars came out, they went towards shovel-ready projects, and so we want to make sure and will be ready if that is the case.
I'm glad you say that, because obviously, the bridge project that we constructed benefited from the fact that it was shovel-ready. Make that case and benefit from that, those programs at that time. Okay, that's all I had. Any other?
I was just curious, how are we able to reduce your carbon footprint by 144 tons?
So those were the three modifications to our membrane process that reduce the energy consumption of that process, converting the the membrane feed pumps to variable frequency drive to be able to installing interstage booster pumps. So the membranes run two stages, installing smaller energy efficient interstage booster pumps, which take burden off on the large 300 horsepower primary membrane feed pumps, and then the pressure exchange devices that capture the pressure or energy from the concentrate and directs that back towards the to the membrane feed, reducing more burden off of those.
Who's helping you with the analysis of how to be more energy efficient? And I know that you're doing a lot of that probably, just understanding new technology and things that are available to reduce our operation costs and stuff, which I think is very, big advantage for doing that, because I'm very supportive of that. And you've been able to do what you've done there, pretty impressive for me. That's why I was hoping we could maybe dig into the solar panels as well and start looking to cut some of our energy consumption from MPNL. And they might even have programs that are available to do as well in this municipality.
So we worked with the projects that are up here. That analysis, we worked with a consulting firm called Wright Pierce, and that's a project that we've been working with them on. The analysis of this we've been working with them on since the spring.
Yeah, didn't you approve something in one of our meetings one time for our consulting fee?
That's
Yeah. So this is the results or something.
this is the result.
There you go.
Fruits of the expenditure.
Yeah.
Marcia, you have a question?
I have a question, and forgive me, I'm just asking what this is on page 106. It says concentrate disposal relocation for FDOT Jupiter Federal Bridge replacement.
Yep.
What is that?
So speaking about the concentrate, it's a byproduct of the membrane process. It's essentially the groundwater that we pull up that's concentrated by about a factor of 4, and then disposed of. We dispose of it underneath the US 1 bridge is where the disposal location is. So we have a pipe, a 12-inch main that goes from the plant to the diffuser, which is under there. That bridge is being replaced. So that pipe was in that pipe and diffuser were installed in the late 90s, early 2000s, under an FDOT right-of-way permit. One of the privileges that we have of having that permit with the FDOT is whenever they do work, we get to move out of their way at our cost.
Okay.
And so they're putting in a new bridge, and we have some relocations to do to get out of way of the construction.
And then are you gonna put it back where it is originally, or is it just
No,
leave
it's,
it where you relocated?
so right now it runs, at least between Beach Road and the bridge. It crosses and runs on the west side of the road. And so once they finish, we have a couple temporary relocations there. And then once they complete the bridge, we'll be moving it to the east side of the road.
So
along
that's
the-
the second allocation in the third budget year, 400 and something.
Yes, moving it to its new permanent location on the east side of the road, moving right along the property line for the park there. If you find a way how, let me know.
Okay, any other questions? Matt, thank you.
You're welcome.
Aaron? So we're gonna move back to the diligence budget directly. So I started on the right side of the room this time, I'm gonna go to the left side of the room.
Well, but if you will, let me kind of dive into, and this will lead us all into questions and conversation.
You want to cover the strategic plan time?
So there was a, I mean, you guys have these in our packet, it's backup. Some of these are probably worth the discussion, but I'm gonna point out a couple of them that have come to me that I think there's maybe further discussion. So these strategic initiatives, budget look presentation is how the process, how we budgeted for these strategic initiatives. And you guys have seen some of these, but I just want to, I'll go through and I'm going to go to slide 3 to start, which is, my slides aren't, and we talked a little bit about this, just meet our unassigned fund balance. This is one of our initiatives that we've taken on for the past couple of years, just to see where we've been, where we are, where we're projected, and then so I've talked about a little bit about this. Our goal, our next one will bring you guys a policy with a 3 months. So just to give you kind of a feel for it. The next one, stop me if anybody wants to talk about these, was going to be our road program. So I know we've had a lot of conversation just this past year about where we are, where we're going. And so I wanted to kind of show just a little bit of historical, that, back 2 years ago, we funded 55,000. This year, 255,000, the list of roads. We've had a conversation, and we've even had we'll say a request from the country club to improve those roads. This shows that we're going to be budgeting $614,000. The idea is to try to get it through phase 1. There is, there's obviously some core sampling engineering that has to be done in a couple of the areas of phase 1, but we will try to push forward with the rest of it. And then as we get those core samplings, and we'll have to draw it up how, what we're going to need to do. It's going to be a little bit more expensive, but so our plan is try to get as far as we can, and then obviously whatever's left, it'll be 22, 23. In the meantime, we are trying to go for a grant that hopefully will cover all of phase 1 and part of phase 2. And so I just want to maybe bring this one up. If there's any conversation or questions about our road program, we can discuss this. Obviously, this is on our website. You guys have seen this before. Looks purple in this slide. The purple is phase 1. That's what we're trying to do. This southern part down here is the part that we recently did. So we do have some parts over here still, and of course, you've got El Portal and the country club area over there. Any specific questions or direction or thought from council on that particular initiative?
Just for the record, which purple areas are the ones that need the core sampling?
Doug's right behind you, and so correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, but I believe this section's over here is what is the part of it, and I believe, and I don't know the name of the street stuff, and you can help me, but
There you go. Yeah. Matt, you mentioned that whole section in the country club community, that's where we're going to do the course.
so not all of it may not, be bad, but we know for sure there are sections of it in there. And so that's what the core samplings will show us. I think it's $30,000 per core sampling to do that next year and really do some evaluation. And we don't want to go through and just, put something together that's going to fall apart. We want to make sure it's done and it's done for 20 years and to be able to drive on that for a long period of time without having to replace it.
I would just encourage you to do it based on the need, condition of the road. Whatever is the worst condition, let's go.
Well, that's what the whole premise of this is based off of complaints, years, you know, maintenance. I mean, there's a whole assessment that's done with it. This isn't a, you know.
Not a lot more speaking, but
Right, exactly.
And Doug, I asked you a few meetings ago, if, like every year, we're gonna keep looking at it, all the roads. So if one happens to get more damaged in another year or two, it could be bumped up and
correct.
like keep it as a live active moving
Yeah.
plan.
And then depending on how we do with the grant, that'll really affect what we can do going forward, how much we can tackle next year. That grant funded.
So in the phase 2 section, are we confident that the underlying road bed and foundations are in good shape? So is it, or is it only phase 1 where?
Some of it is, some of it's not. So
Okay.
as we move forward and we do the assessment on an annual basis, like Councilmember Graham just mentioned, we will assess that moving forward. But the worst areas right now are in the Pines, around Hickory Hill area, Pine Mill Trail West, Ridgewood, and then a lot of the areas in the country club. Those are the worst areas that have major defects, but we need to do some core sampling, see what the base looks like, and see how far we're going to take the road up.
Would you say it's also where we've got a stormwater issue?
In the Pines, yes. I would say the country club community, I would say a lot of that relates to the work that was done 20 years ago. So
That was my concern last time we talked about this plan, was I definitely rather do the roads correctly. So I'm all for doing enforcement and making sure we're not just slapping something together.
well, I think we're all good.
Yeah.
you can't go in there and just mill and pave the road. You have drainage issues.
What are the core sampling gonna tell you?
Core sample will tell us what the base looks like. It'll give us an assessment of each layer of the base to see
How deep you go down?
where the base is degraded.
Yeah, you know, well, I mean, I live in the other phase of phase 1 there, West Drive. And what I'm seeing is not necessarily the base and the sub-base thing, where I think that the issue stuff is where they came in and put in maybe a sanitary line or something, or a water line or something.
Right.
And what's happened is I don't think they compacted the ditches well around the pipe that are probably much deeper than what your sub-base and base material are going to be to support the road. And so it's fading deeper than that. And so all of that is settled down around, you know, your pipe and stuff, that to me was never installed correctly. We didn't have that settled in it. And so I don't know if the cords are going to go deep enough to tell you that. Are you planning on TVing any of this and looking down through there and look to see where you may have some infiltration? And then you need your sanitary water line?
Matt, who's teething on stormwater pipes where we've had some failures. So where Matt has capital projects where he's going to be lining or replacing pipe, we're waiting for that work to happen. We're following up after that. So where either a utility company goes in there or we go in there and we line the pipe, like you just mentioned, it doesn't address the defect in the road. What happened to the road? We have depression in the road, it looks like an old road. So it's a balance between we go in and obviously it's cheaper to go in and line a pipe. It's cost effective to line a pipe versus tearing up the entire road. But there are some roads throughout the village where we will need to go in there and replace the entire base and the entire road, depending on those deficiencies. But we are basing that on information that comes through our utility department and Loxahatchee River District. Loxahatchee River District is doing the same thing right now. They're TVing all their pipes, they're fixing their roads, and so we're following up with them as well. And that will determine moving forward what we have to do and which roads will come next in the capital plan.
Well, you know, and this will be the last thing I'll say in regards to this, but just because you're not showing infiltration into a storm pipe doesn't mean that the dirt around it, you know, that's where, you know, you could have settled from lack of compaction that was originally installed.
Yes.
So unless you fix that deficit there, you know, and fill that void back in down deep, you know, you still have the potential of it settling in.
Yeah, and the water table is so high, it's 6 feet under in the water.
Right.
So we we have that constantly pushing up on the road base as well. So, yeah, we're gonna have to address compaction, and we're gonna have to address these areas of, you know, just from assessing and looking, not even with a scope, you go out and look at the areas in the country club where Locks and Hatch put in their sanitary sewer manholes. They're all too high compared to the road. So I wasn't here 20 years ago. I don't know what happened. We can't go back 20 years. So we need to fix it.
Yeah.
So the work that Federal wants going on with the grant, that we talked about previously, I think we were targeting 3 million. Where does this seem? One and number two, how do we arrive at the $3 million cost? Given, you know, some of the needs we have across the board, and how far will that 3 million? I know it depends a little bit on what you find, but how far do you think, if that is the maximum amount we can go for, how far do you think that will take us?
We do not have a cost yet. I'm hoping to have a cost before the end of this week. We have a meeting on Friday where we'll have a budgetary cost, and then I will get with the clerk and the manager. We actually have to go out and put that out to the public, advertise it, because the grant submission date is September 11th. But I will have a budgetary cost by Friday, by the end of the day Friday, and I believe it will be a lot more.
So with what you're attempting to achieve, what do you want to, with this grant, what's the maximum amount that we go for? How much of this work can you get done within the purview of this grant, whatever the specifications are?
And we can go for a $10 million grant. So what we're trying to do is, with our engineering firm and core sampling moving forward, right now we're going to set a target goal, you know, to go in there and address these issues throughout the country. We're going to have to get some stormwater catch basins, storm pipe, some sidewalk, some important areas for connectivity. We're going to have to address all of that. So it'll be drainage, it'll be sidewalks, it'll be roads, all of that. And it may lean even more towards a drainage project, and then because the drainage is going to come first, and then come the sidewalk and the road after that.
But for example, we talked about the pines having similar problems. So we're looking at something that is inclusive of not only the country club area, but the pines as well. I mean, that's why I'm trying to get
This grant is strictly for that area.
Okay.
To help answer your question a little bit, for those that, you know, I think this is what you're looking for. It's hard to determine what the real cost and how far 3 million are going to go until they evaluate what it's going to take to repair it so that it doesn't fail again. And, you know, the water system, sanitary system, the storm drainage system stuff is really not failing. I just think that the installation was done badly. And that's where we're having a lot of our big issues and stuff with the settling of the road. You know, once I think they go in and TV and start doing the research and stuff, that I think that they will find some infiltration in some of the storm drainage system and stuff. You may have some leaks and stuff in some of the water mains and stuff that are creating a void in there as well, making the area much softer and stuff on a more regular basis, allowing it to settle down. So until they complete their full evaluation, I think it's going to be difficult for them to determine how far it's going to go and what you're going to be.
Well, that's what I was asking, because the 3 million number has been thrown out previously, so that's why I was wondering, you know, how do we derive it? Is it the right number? Should we be seeking additional
It'll be
dollars?
more than that.
We'll
know by this Friday.
Okay, so you'll have a handle on that stuff. Okay.
My question is, who's responsible to go back and impact the sanitary? If that's where an issue is
Kind of fall on the village.
Yeah, and that's long been gone down. Once they pull out and stuff, and after a year or so, their warranty and stuff is basically gone. I mean, that's
But would Lockheed have to be involved at all? That's,
you know,
I'd say
I
it's
don't
be
know
involved
about
as far as providing data. They've TV'd and lined their pipes and they don't have leaks. In the country club community, as Councilmember Prince mentioned, there is more settling in their compaction issues. In the pines, they had failures, right? We know they had failures. They continued to get worse. On top of that, we had cross sections that were stormwater failures. Those were more failures. Country club community is an installation issue.
And it's a shame though, because whoever did it 20 years ago just did a piss poor job on it. You know, and that's
everyone knows.
Yeah.
Molly, do you have anything?
Just on, I don't know if I've had issues with this on the project. do you think, have the king tides been affecting any of the roads or the subgrade that are the ones that are close to the water? I don't know, like where the outfalls are located. Any issue or thing?
I don't think it's tied directly to the king tide, but anytime you have water moving and putting pressure upon your road and your face, it's going to at some point affect your road as the road begins to age. But the better installation you have, the better base you have. Obviously, the longer the life of your road. But water is like, water is absolutely going to affect the road over a period of time, including the sun on temperature being down on top of the house. You have one on top with the heat cracking the road, drying out the road, and then the water pressure we have it on both sides over a period of time. It can wear out your road. But the better the insulation at the time the project is happening, it's like anything else, the longer you can preserve the life.
And I may have asked you this before, what's the average life expectancy now on an asphalt road?
Years ago, you could get 20, 30 years out of a road. Now we're seeing maybe 15.
Just like the work quality's going down. Huh?
So just, I guess
There's a lot of different, just to add to that, there are factors as well. How heavily traveled the road is. You have trucks traveling that road, obviously. You have main artery like Tequesta Drive, it's ours. Tequesta Drive, Country Club, Seabrook, Riverside. Those are your main arteries that are heavily traveled. You have some side streets that just people coming in and out, basic deliveries. You get you'll see a longer extended life expectancy.
just from note, I mean, we're not planning on the grant. We hope that we get it, but we have a plan moving forward with our 20-year, annual street maintenance program. We're going to continue to do that. We'll look for additional funding options, and hopefully, depending on what budgets looks like in the future, we'll try to add more to the, to each particular year to try to get through this process. But there's nothing in the budget for the grant. Obviously, we hope we get it. The other one that I wanted to, touch on a little bit is the sidewalk, because I know that's been a topic conversation. Just showing what we've done with Country Club. We're getting very close to phase 2 with the Country Club and aprons, and we've done various grinding and maintenance of the sidewalks. Next year, we do have $80,000 in the budget. I think 60 of it's for a specific project on Tequesta Drive and Seabrook. Then we'll have some additional sidewalk maintenance. And so we have every year, and you'll see a little bit more than 5-year plans, a couple more years add to this. Every year we have a project for the sidewalks. We'd obviously like to expedite that process too. The budgets the way they are, we'll continue to look at that, to feed this, the funding for this particular initiative if we can.
Really quick, the Tequesta Drive from Seabrook to Venus, is that the whole sidewalk, or is that kind of how you guys just did 3 to 4 pieces in?
That is the whole sidewalk and the aprons in front of the homes there. We have some serious EDA non-compliance issues.
That's what I was asking.
We have a 5 to 7% slope on the sidewalk in the driveways. As a matter of fact, this past year, the young boy seriously hurt.
I'm asking too.
Any other
I have a question on the
questions on
sidewalk.
the sidewalk?
Yeah, I have a plan that, showed new sidewalks in a couple areas for 22, 23. Once this budget, I didn't see it on here. Is that not, but what happened to that plan?
For new sidewalks?
Yeah, you sent it to me when I was asking questions when I first got on council, and it wasn't a lot. There was an L portal.
We had discussion about adding sidewalk at El Portal, and then possibly on the north side of Tequesta Drive from Country Club to almost Point Drive. There's no sidewalk there as well. So that was something that we had talked about, but that's just an adder. That's an addition. What's a higher priority for the areas where we have defects. Where it's not ADA compliant versus an area that doesn't have sidewalk yet. You have to fix. The goal is to fix the deficiencies first. The sidewalk that exists already.
And that El Portal sidewalk is part of this larger grant process if we can get that. I mean, we also looked at the transportation grant through the county. That was an initiative that we were shooting for. So Those projects aren't gone, it's just when we're looking at 5-year capital, we're looking at the maintenance first, like, let's take care of what we have first, and then we'll work on expanding.
And
Which I totally agree with.
And the El Portal sidewalk, Doug, you explained at some point that it's not just the sidewalk, it has to go with a new swale and everything, right?
Right.
So it's a whole,
It's a comprehensive plan. We need a comprehensive plan to address everything. If we go in there, like I said, just fix the roads, we don't fix it. If we go in there and put in sidewalk, the sidewalk's gonna go in the water. So we have to start from the starting point all the way through. And the first part is to address the drainage, then the roads, the swales, and the sidewalks.
So I just wanna, and I agree, we need to fix what we have first, but me personally, some of these areas where you guys are losing them, I think they're dangerous as a pedestrian biker. So I just wanna see, are we going for grants? Like, I haven't seen anything, any discussion on, so I just wanna make sure we're doing something, even just going for grants.
Specifically on El Portal, that one
Or
you're
the
referencing.
new sidewalk plan in general, but.
El Portal is included in the grant if we get the grant. If we don't get the grant, then we're gonna phase through these road projects and see when we can put in some swales and some sidewalks. But right now, I'm not sure where you live, but if you walk down El Portal and, I mean, you don't need a storm, there is no place to walk. I mean, I have
walk
about
on it often.
I have about 100 pictures on my computer with in a pair of boots, and the water's to the top of my boots. So those are some of the pictures we're gonna be submitting with the grant. You're only allowed to submit 10 pictures. We'll pick the best 10 pictures out of those hundreds of pictures we have. But yeah, there is no place to walk out there. I've seen women pushing strollers with children trying to get through there. And now you have cars coming, the water's spraying everywhere. There's no place for these folks to go.
The curb area.
Right. So if we did put some sidewalk out there, the sidewalk is in the water as well. Is it safer than walking in the street? I would say so. But, let's see what happens with this grant.
And which grant is that? The DOE grant?
Yeah.
Before we leave the sidewalks, just a thought, for everybody weighing out. The money we're getting from the federal government increased by almost $800,000 over the 2 years. We've deferred a portion of that to year 3, but we're by then lost rate will be online, C-Glass will be online. I would like to suggest that we accelerate the sidewalk program. I'd like to see us take some of that money that we're deferring in year 3 and the project that we have, the Seabrook Road and Dover Ditch, the north side of Tequesta Drive, and the Tequesta Drive to Seabrook. I'd like to see us accelerate all those. I don't know what the cost numbers are on those. We've only got the one here for $75,000.
Yeah, the good thing about Seabrook and the remainder of Tequesta Drive, not all the sidewalk is affected. A lot of the issues are right at the cross streets where we're not ADA compliant, we're not ADA mats. There are some issues where the sidewalk benches, trucks have driven on. So a lot of the sidewalk will remain, but at every intersection, much like we just did out here on Tequesta Drive.
But I think from Molly's point, we want people to walk more, we want people to bike more, we want people out about in the city. And it becomes an impediment to that when the sidewalks don't measure up. And we've already seen the positive responses we've gotten from the work that's being done on Country Club. So I'd like to see us take some of that money that's being diverted for year 3, knowing what other things are coming. And like I said, accelerate the sidewalk projects getting done a little quicker.
I would be against that aspect of it. I don't want to spend it until we collect it. Seeing Osprey was delayed a year or 2.
So we're going to collect the extra 400 by the end of this month.
I hate spending it until we got it.
So these monies, just so you're saying year 3, these monies, the money that you see that's moved to year 3 is what we can project as lost revenue. So we can't move that up. It has to be in year 3 because that's the year we're going to be projecting lost revenue. So that lost revenue can be used for operational purposes, but you have to recognize it's a lost revenue first before you can use it.
We don't have any justification to try.
Right, you can't just take, just because we have it in the bank, you have to be able to, it has to be shown that it falls in one of those 4 categories that was up there. So just because we have $1 million in the bank, we can't just take it and use it for what they call legacy projects or whatever. You have to, it has to be shown that it's a lost revenue. And so we'll continue to look at it. I hear you. If that lost revenue can be used for those types of projects, we will look at it. And then you and I will make sure that we're looking at that.
Good try there, Frank.
Okay.
That's right.
We got to make sure we're using the money right and
No, I
within
know.
bounds. And you has sat through a number of those things. I have too, and we feel good about where we're at, and we'll continue to make sure that we're using them properly. So,
No, you're right. They have to be, signed this properly, they can ask you for it back. So I agree about it.
Could I? Just one more
Yes,
thing.
yes.
There's a controversy in the Pines about aprons. A lot of permits have the aprons with craters. And the ordinance, according to my reading, is that it's concrete by village ordinance. Is there a reason why they have to be concrete? Is there a drainage reason or some reason why they have to be concrete and they can't damage the rest of the driveway?
Well, where we typically have utilities, it falls in the village right of way, the apron falls in the village right of way, the sidewalk falls in the village right of way, and then we also have some right of way into the property. So where you're most affected by utility work is in those areas.
Okay.
So when Matt and I discussed standardizing throughout the village, because there was no standardization, people would build driveways with 30 to 38 foot flares and pavers, and ultimately the village is responsible for liability if somebody falls out in the right of way. So what's a better fit for us is to see concrete from the right of way, from the sidewalk to the road. And what we've also done is improve the quality of the installation, where we come back with that apron perpendicular to the road. We have a 12-inch footer at the edge of the road to protect the edge of the road. So we're standardizing and putting a better product in.
So it's
You
more
have
of a
pavers,
control
pavers
issue
settling,
than any
you have
kind of
pavers.
drainage or anything. Because the problem is, it doesn't matter to me if I put a driveway in, I have a little tiny apron, it doesn't matter. But I have neighbors that have huge aprons, huge. And if they put pavers in, and then they have the sidewalk, and then they have concrete, it's gonna look horrible. And some of them do have pavers and they've been permitted, so the problem is kind of inconsistent.
Yeah, I was wondering if some of that went back to,
Where we have sidewalk.
I know there used to be a disconnect in communication between the HOA approving projects like that and the village.
But they always go through the village after
So it's
HOA, so it doesn't really matter what HOA says if it's against ordinance.
wherever you've had pavers installed already, they're grandfathered in. We're not going back ripping out the pavers, but if somebody, and Matt just reminded me as well, when we do not have sidewalk, we are allowing pavers to the road. Right, they're still putting in a footer in the right of way as well at the road. But where we have sidewalk, we want to see concrete all the way through.
So you're gonna be consistent about that
From the sidewalk
going
through the
forward?
apron.
You're gonna be consistent about that with permits that you don't get a permit, that the apron has to be concrete.
Yep, Matt and I now review all the permits in the right of way.
Okay.
Takes the application, forward it to us, and Matt and I review that, and go out and do all the inspections.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, this is an assumption on what you're saying too, but that's a little bit on that. If someone had a brick paver and we had to go through there and do a repair for a utility line, unfortunately goes down that right of way, then we would be responsible to put everything back. And it's hard to take pavers up and put them back exactly where they were. And you have to go and get more than, but if it's all concrete, and we just go and remove the concrete, put everything back.
I'm just looking for consistencies, because now people want
Let's focus on the
driveways,
budget.
Yeah.
and they
Just
want
have
their
the budget
apron like
meeting,
their neighbor.
Yeah, yeah. But they're gonna take it.
So let's go, we can go back to the budget, because we can't get too much off topic.
Sorry about that.
Hey, Jeremy, can you go back to PI 3? So I know there's nothing planned in the budget, but I know EDC was working on that micro transit for quite a while. Where did that land?
So what Molly's referring to is the EAC, they looked at like a micro transit program, like having carts take citizens, to and from businesses, from their, from their houses, and help citizens get around. There was a couple of programs that the EAC looked at. There's FDOT has a grant program, a 50% matching grant for 3 years. The program, there's some problem with programs is the carts can go across US 1, but they can't drive on US 1. And they can't go on the sidewalks. So what happens is you only have 2 crossings. You have Tequesta Drive and you have County Line Road. And so how do you get people to and from? I know the EAC looked at another program that had like Teslas, some Tesla vans, and that was an option. Even 50% of that program is like $100,000. What I think is going to be interesting is, and we can continue to look at that program and look for other options to fund that. I know we're anxious with the bridge closing. I think what's going to be interesting as we move forward is the surtax that it stands today. They're really looking at, I know from the county standpoint, as that sunsets, really turned into like a transportation or mobility tax. And so, obviously with the village, we have, I'll say depending on how this is framed, we don't have a lot of mobility type programs. That might be one that we look at funding, something like that. So it'll be very interesting kind of the next year to 2 years, what that transportation tax looks like. And maybe that's something that, we'll possibly fund it if we don't fund it, before then. But, $100,000 for that program, missed the grant deadline, which is part of the problem why I haven't brought it to you, because it doesn't open until next June again. So we got a little bit of time. I'll bring it back to you guys, see if that's something that interests you in the coming budget process.
I think the big question is how much demand would there actually be for that?
So that's kind of where they always get stuck to, and budget wise, because they are very aware of our very tight budget, and they are also very much advocating for parks to be done and trees and all that stuff. So they kind of weigh what's more important and can be used more. And they tinkered on looking at, what if Jupiter kind of tied in and used it, because we don't have that many hot spots in Tequesta. So they also looked at if you were to go over by the inlet, say at night, and use this service to visit some of the popular restaurants and whatnot. But then the bridge would close, so you can't really get there. And then, like Jeremy pointed out, some of the little carts, and they can't cross certain roads. So there was a lot of little roadblocks that they they're chopping through it, and that's why they keep revisiting and inviting different programs and organizations and to kind of weigh all the options before they come with a better presentation with some answers, even because we're all gonna have the same questions as they have.
Yeah, so Jupiter's evaluated a program like that, and they're passing on partnering with us. I reached out to them. So I know they were going to be one of our bigger partners in that, and they said it's not. They jumped into a program of like Uber or Lyft around special events and things that Uber or Lyft will just bill the town of Jupiter. If you're to or from Jupiter, if you want to call Uber, you have the code. You punch it in, get you home safe for the night. They just specifically, bill the town of Jupiter. So they've looked at this option. They think they found some better alternatives. So another one that was on, I know that we talked about with our business forum of how we can help some of our businesses, especially through the bridge. But obviously some of the effects of COVID. So the use of ARPA funds is one that we, targeting like a business liaison, special events person, special events being able to really target businesses, allow them part of our, food truck events, give them an opportunity to, promote, advertise, how we can help those businesses, coordinate the shop DOT events, and seeing how we can continue to make those events bigger. You also see that we have some program costs that we, can hopefully do another event or two that's really business centered. And so I wanted to point that one out because that one's been a topic of conversation for all of council. You guys want how we can help businesses. So I feel like this is an angle that we can use the ARPA funds to help with some of our local businesses. Questions or
going along with what Lori said earlier about the need for position, identifying the need, and then my biggest question is what happens to the position after our funds are gone.
So I think this is something we should be looking at absorbing, just because our, it'll be part of our recreation staff and helping, hopefully he can, shift the special events over to this particular person that'll relieve his, his staff. But, long-term with the rec center coming on, we obviously have higher expectations for the rec center than what, the old building is, new programming, new instructors. I mean, they're gonna be busy. I mean, and so if we don't fund something like this, I mean, we're gonna have to fund a staff member. And so over a period of 3 years, we're gonna end up absorbing this salary into our operations, and not just be ARPA funds, but it's gonna have to be something we absorb over a long period of time. Or we're gonna have to create another position, a coordinator position, to fund that. So I think that, if this works out over a 3-year period, that's how we'll shape that position, is it'll be very driven on special events and, businesses, and, obviously still helping with some of the operations over there, but a big portion of it be, our business population too. So.
I agree with you. And I know I'm personally watching that position very carefully. And I know I would expect it to be a very hands-on position. But once we get to that point where we have to reevaluate, we still need it, I'm willing to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think we definitely should.
And we'll see, like, recs are open, and let's see how the rest of the team does. I'm open to reevaluate it whenever that comes up. That's a big chunk.
Yeah, and you've got the opportunity to use your staff, putting somebody in, seeing how the position evolves, see how it works. Utilizing these funds, and then if folks said, if you get a little further down the road, you evaluate it, make a determination, does this exact position, this kind of a role, it's paired with the recreation side, is it really, are we getting full realization of value out of it, or do we move to just simply adding an additional staff in the rec center?
And so this salary, just so everybody is transparent, it's not an $85,000 salary. This is the, with benefits and, all the stuff that goes along with it.
So I was going to say, the benefit that I see, the reason a lot of this came up in discussion over the last year, was the fact that we're just in the idea of connecting the community residents with local businesses. And that's been the biggest challenge that we've had, is just that connection, trying to get people to connect with the local businesses.
And I agree with that, and that's why, when our funds came out, was a big avenue to make sure it's going back to community who are impacted businesses. A lot of the duties and responsibilities, a lot of them are for like internally operations, events, and marketing. I really want to make sure there is that defined and distinct role of working with the business. So that's kind of just a little bit of my concern after reading the job description.
I want to provide that. I mean, obviously there's some comments or feedback, but I think, in the way that I've envisioned it, and I talked with Greg a little bit, is really a lot of our events and being able to invite businesses to those events, participate. And I know we've done that in the past, but really have somebody picking up the phone and seeing how they can participate. And maybe there's some shop DOT events that this person will really be able to reach out to somebody. Obviously Lori and her team do a great job of communicating, but having somebody that says, hey, you've never participated in this event the last 2 years, picking up the phone and talking to them, or going out to them, I think that'll add a lot of value to just, improving that event as well. So I hear you. I think that'll be a big part of it. And so I'm open for feedback on the job description. If you want to send me an email or something, we can try to incorporate that. All right. And then I think we're making good pace. I mean, I don't know about some of the other initiatives, but big ones that we're going to have next few 4 or 5 slides, and I've included a couple since with you, besides your guys' packet, just for conversation and where we're going, but just talk about our long-term strategy for parks and green spaces. In this budget, we do have $75,000 allotted for Remembrance Park, the construction drawings. We're not just going to start construction drawings. We need to do some, hopefully do that first. So this is kind of the process for Remembrance Park. Just wanted to, be clear, we're estimating toward the end of this year, we'll start some public feedback. some displays, some tables for feedback at some of our special events. A couple of town hall type meetings where we roll out some maps, let people give some feedback, do a community survey just based on this park alone. And then we'll develop a draft plan based on the public feedback, bring that back to council. Whatever you guys have been hearing, we can incorporate that and basically adopt a master plan for Remembrance Park. Then we'll work, once we get that master plan, then we'll start working on the construction drawings for that and come up with an estimate of cost. Once we get that estimate of cost, then we can develop a timeline, construction, maybe it needs to be phased in depending on what the cost is, what that park looks like. I mean, I know right now we're very passive, very trail, whether we put in a pavilion or not, I mean, that'll just be public feedback park. So depending on the cost of that and where we are budget wise, will depend on how we get there. So we'll develop a long-term plan, maintenance plan, even a management plan for that park. So that way it's taken care of over time. So in this budget process, we have $75,000. We do have a grant for $50,000 to build a walkway, do some landscaping with that project. However, as I've shared, you can't have a park unless it's ADA compliant. So, we've got an estimate for just the parking lot over there is like $110,000. So it's kind of hard to build some landscaping and walkway if you don't have a park that's ADA compliant. It's not considered a park, so it's hard to use. So, as we've worked with our grant writer a little bit, we've talked about, is there additional grants out there? There is another grant out there for $1 million. However, to build a park, develop a park. However, we can't have two open grants at the same time. So right now we do have $50,000. In order to apply for the $1 million grant, we'd have to withdraw the $50,000 grant. And that would take a kind of a council decision if that's the way you guys want to go. It's hard for me to have a recommendation on that because I don't know what the plan is going to look like, and but that's a conversation to have tonight. That's why I put it on this slide so council as a whole can give me some direction.
Does the parking?
Yes.
Can you just have sidewalks that just people in the area come to?
Yeah.
Get that parking building, or you can't just park down.
I don't know, Jose. What do you think?
No.
No. All right, so, yeah, we've had a little bit of conversation. I asked him, come on, Jose.
There's a lot of parks that don't have parking. It was kind of in the middle of city centers.
It's not going to be available for everyone. Somebody with a good shell on it, enjoy the parks.
I think we want to do it right too. I mean, if we're going to do it, let's make sure it's something that we're proud of too.
What's the timeline for that $1 million grant?
I don't have the answer.
Or you might have to be
But
submitted.
it's still coming. I mean, it's, a couple months out. I'd have to get the time frame on it. It was just thrown out there for one. I can get you a date and I'll get back to you, but.
That's gonna help me.
But what the legislature has funded this particular program. This grant.
I'm not saying yes or no, I'm just curious what the timeline between, when we have to use the 50 grand or after.
Okay, well, I'll get you that. That'll help make a decision and we'll decide how we get a vote from you guys or if that's how you guys want to go with a future conversation.
So do we want to put that on a workshop for the 30th?
Yeah, let me see about the date and all that. I'll develop kind of, something for you guys to chew on.
Okay.
So that's kind of Remembrance Park and the plan for Remembrance Park, very, moving forward, that's the way I envision it. I think, I've had conversations with council and I think everybody's in agreement that, Remembrance Park is something that we want to move forward with. So Tequesta Park is another one. I know it's been a topic of conversation. I don't necessarily want to get too much into the grant process, but this year, we have funded the tennis court repair and renovation. I know they're out there working on it. We also have dog park improvements that have been done. I think we've opened the dog park up. Dogs have already seen some pictures already tore it up, quite a bit, but it is, we have made some improvements out there. So for 21-22, we have requested money from the state, or we will be. We haven't yet. We haven't submitted that package to Snyder and Powell. They've endorsed the project, they said that they would carry that request for us. We have budgeted an annual maintenance cost of $132,000 a year. That's roughly what we put into that part of the year. We have a couple landscape, there we go. We do have, so this is typically what we have funded out there. The only one that, there's also a $30,000 project that we're going to improve the fields out there. You know, improve the infields, there's no lip, add some clay, level it out, and then fill in the dugout so they're compliant and they're safe out there. So I know there's been some conversation about maintenance costs. That's typically right around what our average runs every year.
We spend $400 on basketball courts every year.
Well, I think that's just for, you know, general maintenance. If the rim breaks, we'll put it out there. So I think it's just, you know, just in case. I know we got some lights out there too. So if we have to replace a bulb, so I mean, you know, do we use $400 every year? I don't know, but I'm sure I mean, you know, a light bulb and, you know, paint, whatever. So that's just a ballpark. Going back to that slide. So, you know, the next steps with this, without the state dollars, you know, I think we need to develop a long-term maintenance plan, a management plan. You know, even if we don't get funding, you know, what are we going to improve from year to year? I know we've done great with you know, the dog park, and we're over at the, you know, tennis courts. You know, maybe next year will be the basketball courts. You know, and so we will develop a long-term maintenance plan, management plan that we don't have currently. I think the next step, if we do get the state dollars, or at least get acknowledged that we are getting it, then we really start the public engagement and really work on a master plan for that park. You know, I know that while we have kind of a rendering or a submittal to the state, we've all agreed that, you know, that plan is not the final plan, that we'll get public engagement on a master plan. So those are really the two different options for us to go. I think, you know, they're both, you know, I think we have a plan for both of them, so to speak. That makes sense.
The only thing I would say there is, I think we wait until we get the state dollars to go public. I think we start with public meetings, late September, October, November, gather input as we move forward with this. Questions get asked. You know, from the various state parties. I want to be able to have that public input to be able to respond accordingly. So I don't see a need to wait till the state dollars are determined one way or the other. I think we need to be going out to the public much more aggressively and having that input so that we can properly represent, you know, ultimately. The other thing I mentioned, Jeremy, and I was probably missing that, referencing this in our earlier meetings. One of the reasons we're up against the timeline we are this year is because next year is a federal election year. So when we talked about, you know, the fact that legislative started in September, normally they would not have started until November or early December. But because it's a federal election year, legislative session, which normally takes place in March and April, it's moved up to January and February. So that's the thing that really impacted us in terms of, you know, this timeline that we're having to grapple with.
So, I mean, I guess I'm at the pleasure of the council, the public engagement part. The reason why I put us two different ways, because I mean, and maybe I'm hearing it different now, but, you know, the public engagement part was, you know, I know we've always said we weren't going to put any major capital. So the public engagement part was basically because we're going to develop that part, we're going to put capital into it. So that's why I was kind of waiting. If we don't get the funds, we've always made the commitment, we're going to put any major capital things in there. So to me, it becomes just a maintenance and upkeep part. And so, and I guess the way I'm hearing is that the public engagement part is for, you know, I guess even future submittals to the state.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't, even if we're not successful this go around, you know, follow particularly, so we'll keep going after it. Now, as we talked about, this year in particular is an opportunity year because of all the federal money coming in at the state level. So there's a better chance with that funding being available than there might be in future years. But I think getting that public input early on in terms of what we would do if we get state money, I think is important. But you're right, we need a plan B. So for example, if we don't get it, what is plan B? Is it maintenance? Do we start to then go to the county? Do we go to Warren County? Do we look for other sources of capital that we can invest? Because truly, this, even though it's called the Tequesta Park, for all real practical purposes, this is a regional park. It benefits South Warren County, it benefits North Palm Beach County. We don't own it, as we all know, we lease it, we manage it, but it's certainly not for the exclusive use of our residents. So I think we need to bring that kind of a mindset, into this whole process. So our resident input is paramount, first and foremost, and it will drive our actions. But I think as we present it to the wider audience, make sure that we're not touting this as just for us. It's for the water.
Budget wise, sticking to that theme, would it be possible as an option when we start putting information to the public, putting out the option with the dream option, hey, if we don't get any money from the state, this is what it would cost to bring it up to code even, clean it up so it's safe. And I know from my prior conversations a while back with Jose, like there was little elements that were out of code even that needed to be, like those dugouts, they can't be in the ground. So I'd like to present that to the public. Worst case scenario, if we never got grants or state funding, whatever, just so you know, this is what it would cost to bring it up to a usability code wise and safety wise. That's what I'm saying, where we can even have anyone come in, play on it safely, it looks nice, but we also are in code compliance. Basically the bottom line. With maintenance, what maintenance yearly would be if we were to just stick to the bottom line and get it using again.
I think it's a great idea.
Give the public that option. Here's our dream, but bottom line, here's this too, which one we don't want.
So we'll take a look at it. I mean, I don't know of all, I know we put in a sidewalk over there to get us out to the courts. I know there was a couple of things we've already addressed, ADA, obviously the fields, the dugouts are an ADA. I don't know how many there are, but we'll take a look at it.
We can take that charrette money and go over and fix that park up.
That's a whole other conversation.
On the application, I think I would like us all to have an application before it goes in. I don't know if that needs to be like a formal official meeting. And I also would like to suggest scale drawing going in on the
No, I agree. Scale drawing is what's appropriate because we don't want to disturb, and we said that, the natural area that already exists. And what I had suggested previously and what Jeremy and I talked about is developing a presentation, having it ready for a review by September 4th. What we had talked about was getting it to Paul, getting it to Snyder, probably State Senator Hill as well, and the council, so that we can gather feedback from everybody to incorporate it into a final presentation and have that ready by the 13th, 14th of September, because the legislative committee will start later that week. So we've got like 3 weeks to develop it, get it out to everybody for input. Handful of days for people to kind of give us their thoughts, and we would finalize it and then we would take it out, take it to the state reps that are going to sponsor it.
So after, if it's just what September 4th is on a workshop or?
That's a Friday. So the goal would be for us.
When would be the next time we see it?
Well, you would see it on the 4th. And then we would gather everybody's comments and input, make any changes.
September 4th is Saturday.
So Saturday would be the 3rd, I'm sorry.
Do you have a meeting on Friday?
No. Well, I think what we look to is distribute it on the 3rd. Give you guys a chance to review it, read it, and either should then put it back. Depending on what that input is, we could have a special meeting if we had to do that.
The meeting's on the 9th,
Or we could do it on the 9th.
so I mean, we could.
So we're really that money.
Do you want me to submit it by? Because I want to submit it.
Well, I want to have it finalized basically by the 10th, or have everything finalized in terms of what we're going to go forward with. And then we make any changes or modifications the following week and have it ready by the end of the following week.
We have to come in for the MSI for you guys.
That's right around.
Well, you don't have a lot of comments. Depends on what comments you have.
Amazing.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll have the final, like, we'll start working on a final draft of that to get it out to you guys by the 3rd, no later. And then we'll have kind of a final packet approval for the 9th at the meeting.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I think if you, my request is it might be nice to have some alternate options in the budget. I know we talked about like artificial turf, I brought up pervious pavement, some environmental friendly solutions. Those I know cost more, so maybe have alternate costs that we can make those kind of decisions.
I'm open to that. And I'd like to see the maintenance for those different products as well as the wear and tear value. And I would want to see us put something in 2 years later, we have to replace the whole thing.
Are you talking about artificial turf for the golf fields?
Different areas.
Yeah.
Just gotta make sure we cover the whole.
Well, I can tell you guys, based on my limited experience, that stuff is really expensive.
That's
I
why
mean, I know the long-term maintenance and environmental impact of natural turf and stuff certainly has its costs and it impacts the environment as well. This is really.
I'm not saying yes or no.
Did I say that it's really expensive?
it is, which is why I think we should.
There's a reason why it's not my
all of our
number.
options and have it on the table. You know,
It's worth looking into. I'm not saying not to.
At least you can tell our residents and have them say, no.
We'll
Be
take a look at that.
transparent.
I would defer to Max. I don't know if pervious pavement is a good idea to help with storm drainage. I've installed it in other states and like grocery store parking lots and stuff. So, but I don't know if here in Florida, station, maybe I don't know that.
No, we can, yeah, I'll talk to him with him. I know we talked about it. It's a great option, but it's expensive too. So, but I'll look at some options for you guys and we'll bring it back to you guys or submit it to you guys on the 3rd as alternative costs type of thing. And they'll be rough because I'm not an engineer, so.
Yeah, you can do the pervious pavement, you know, they got impervious concrete now, and of course, you can do your turf block and stuff like that, and then there's also different, drainage systems and parking lots now. I mean, we're doing 2 underground storage systems now underneath parking lots, stuff. All sorts of opportunities out there right now to be able to control your water, in a lot of different ways and have a lesser impact on the environment at the same time.
My last question regarding parks and specifically parks that are in Tequesta
I'm
lines.
not done with park yet. This is just
Oh,
done
okay.
with this part.
We can't use any of Jose's hefty funds for any structures or anything that would be on them.
Not unless you want to put the building official in them. Yeah.
What does it take to get that money back and not put it somewhere?
Like I said,
We'll spend it.
you gotta ask it. You gotta ask
We'll
it.
spend it.
That's something I don't want to not ask.
You guys, I see that.
All right, so the next one is we want to talk about Paradise Park a little bit. As you guys know, the grant for land acquisition did not get funded by the state this year. So I know we were hoping to chase a $5 million grant to hopefully purchase that property. Did not get funded through the state. I want to talk a little bit about right now, currently today, we pay $42,000 in the annual lease. We do have some maintenance cost of that that are depicted here. If with our last previous conversation, and the mayor may have had a different conversation, we were looking at an increase that they were proposing, even if we went month to month, of $1,000 more a month. So that would bring the annual lease to $54,000, still have the maintenance costs. So, my attempt at having a conversation is through this slide is, what direction we want to go. We obviously didn't get funded for the grant. I think it's important that we try to maintain that relationship with them and even our agreement for the very least the next couple months through November because of our Tequesta Fest and the chili cook-off. And then at that point, it's what directions the council want to go. Do we want to continue month to month and, hopefully something falls to us, or is it, at November, just want to hand it back and let them take over the maintenance and the utilities of that. And so with that, council would be great to have some direction on Paradise Park.
So let me add a little bit to that. Jeremy and I met with Don and Betsy, and I met with Betsy yesterday. They would very much like to see that land be acquired by the village. From their own perspective, they believe that not only would it benefit the village, but it would actually benefit their building and their tenants. They indicated, as Jeremy said, that their costs are about $1,000 a month more than what we're currently paying, so they would like us to cover that cost. They are, Betsy, who is the owner of this property, very much like to clear her plate, so to speak, and have this land acquired. But again, the preference would be that the village acquire it. So I shared with her the information with what happened on the grant. And I said, given that set of circumstances, we're not in a position at this time, obviously to go forward with the purchase. So we talked about, okay, what are their expectations, or what might their expectations be, and what options they could have. I think there's a willingness on their part to go month to month, but they would like some clear direction from the village as to what our intentions are. So if we were to come back and say, well, we want to acquire this land, we still intend to pursue this grant when it is funded. Now, again, there's no absolute guarantee that it will be funded next year, although I think during this conversation with the person at the state, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that she felt that there's a reasonable chance that it would be in the following legislative session. That they would like some clear indication from us that we will continue to pursue it. And they might very well be willing to go month to month. However, if they were to get an offer that, basically matched whatever we would do, and they could sell it outright, they would want to be free to pursue that, knowing that we would still have right of first refusal. So we would still have the right of first refusal if they were to get an offer. But obviously, and I said this to them, well, if we're not to the point of being able to acquire and get a response on that grant, it's not likely at this point, without having discussed it with all the village council members. I said, I don't know if the village is in a position to be able to make an outright purchase without that grant provided to us. So bottom line is, they'd like to see us get it. They're open to discussing an extension of the lease. They're open to a month-to-month arrangement. We would keep a right of first refusal, but they want a clear indication to us that we intend to acquire, we would like to acquire it, and we continue to pursue grant opportunities, make that a reality. But should again they get a viable offer that they can accept, they'll notify us. We'll have a right to refuse if we will choose, or a right to act. And if we choose not to, then they'll go forward with the sale. So that's kind of where we're at.
What's the deadline for next year for that grant?
It ends in December. It was going to close in December.
This year's next month.
Yes. So it would be the next year, December, award the next March. So 2024 March is when that's why I didn't see the money.
Do we have any insurance liability costs associated with that?
It'll be 2023, right?
Okay.
Yeah, in 2023. And I told them that. That would be, what we're looking at. Now, the only positive news is because the legislature is meeting earlier, we'll know basically, depending on whether the Senate does something, we would know basically by the end of February versus the end of April whether it's been funded or not.
I would say my position is that we do not get into it beyond 2020. At the end of this November.
I'm in agreement with you. If they sell it, they sell it. But we've got all this carrying cost and stuff, and I guess we never got around that. My question about the insurance.
I'm working on it. I got Marlene's on the line, so I just sent her a message, so she'll get back to it.
But I don't see it as continuing good. Eventually, they're going to sell it if we don't buy it. In my opinion, the likelihood of us being able to come up with whatever it's going to cost is pretty slim.
For them, I see it as an opportunity for the next 6 to 8 months that we maintain it and pay them rent until they find that buyer.
Go through and do the events and stuff we've got coming up, I guess, in November, and that cut it off. I would let them do the maintenance stuff on it. They come around and you get the money, then let's pick it back up again. So if we don't, then we're paying for the next, what, 7 or 8 months and stuff, and not using it, and we're maintaining it. And they've increased the, $1,000 a month in the cost of it.
Is there any
Look
difference?
what you can do with all that money, add it up.
Is there any differences of opinion? If there is, then I need to bring it to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I still think the opportunity to preserve this land and have it part of the village. Even though I agree, there is a cost element to keeping that opportunity open. I do think it's worth maintaining that opportunity.
I don't think we'll be giving up our opportunity to buy, if we don't continue to do the annual lease and stuff on it.
Still.
I mean, if we come with the money, they don't, I promise you, whoever's got the money in hand first is gonna buy it. And we might have last right refusal, but if they get an offer on there, they're gonna sell it.
Well, yeah, and if they get an attractive offer, I agree. They will sell it. And then the question is what goes on there.
For our code.
That's another issue,
No, I know.
yeah.
Whatever allows for our code.
When is that new special events position gonna start? You have to find somebody.
I'll have to advertise it, so we probably started. We can start advertising it now. I mean, now, assuming that you guys are good with the budget, we'd probably wait until at least the first budget hearing to make sure that, we're all in agreement. This is the budget we want to see before we started, but we can start advertising now. We should hire it until we approve the budget. All right.
Bring it to vote.
Okay. Well, we'll see if we can negotiate some lease and see what those terms are, and that way you guys are having something to vote on besides.
I can't give you my decision right this second. I have to do a couple of things in my head first.
The only other, I guess, bigger topic, and we opened the floor was, Tequesta Fest. I mean, since we just brought up Paradise Park, that's Linear Park, but is Tequesta Fest. We've talked about, and we have it in the budget for $81,000 for Tequesta Fest, the increased cost for that. Greg and I have talked about some different scenarios, especially with the way that COVID is not having an event that's, open to everybody and having, all the people kind of coming from, all around the county, is having a smaller event that we had last year. It'll also obviously be bigger and open to more citizens, and we'll do like a 2-day event over Constitution Park with food trucks, rides, make it a bigger event, and have some different times. But that's a $45,000 option, something I forget the cost off the top of my head, versus an $81,000 option, and that's twofold because of the cost and because of COVID. So there's kind of a reason that we kind of come for the second option. We have fully funded Tequesta Fest at 81 if that's the way council wants to keep in that direction. But our concerns right now is a little bit with COVID and just the cost of that event. So any direction you guys want to give us?
Somebody else.
All right,
I'll give my vote.
I think we should absolutely try to do Tequesta.
The big version.
I'm okay planning for the big version, and if there are reasons, for health reasons, to make a small version, great. If there are reasons against it, then it is what it is. I say keep moving forward.
I like the idea of going to big version and so forth. We don't know what's gonna happen here in the future, especially with the resurgence and stuff with COVID. We're right now, we're looking to be, in a bad situation again. I mean, things could go kind of sour on us here in the next several months and stuff. We don't get a handle on this COVID, so. But I always like to look on the bright side and plan for the best and hope for the best and stuff, so I'm fine with that.
And on this one, I would go prepared to saving money on this one. So still create almost like a county fair type environment. I think the 2 days, again, keeping it with residents only, the crowds and at a reasonable level, give our residents a chance to really enjoy it. And I think we take that $35,000 and use it for something else. I mean, for other needs, for example, the sidewalk. But I think that's money we can use elsewhere.
Give a deadline on when you need to know if it's scaled back. I know a lot of times it's book those vendors way in advance.
How many months ago, Greg? How many months ago did we need it?
We need to know now. And the issue also is that we might be dealing with COVID here, but the vendor, where they come from, most of those workers may not even make it down to Florida. So, a lot of like unknowns with that industry.
So you're giving us a direction and we're gonna try to make it happen.
And we, I have to plan for it. If you give me a month to plan for it, that's not, and we're getting ready to open up a brand new building, that's hard to do, so.
So we can't, like, if we're going all in now, we can't scale back later if we decide based on the
Just, I think just attendees, not what is offered at the event, but
the cost savings.
whether
when
it's
we
just
realize
residents
we're
or if even limited to a certain amount each day. Someone stands at the gate clicking the thing. I don't want to go down that one, but
Well,
like Bruce said, who knows what.
I mean, it's 81,000 for the big event, or it's 45 for a smaller event at Constitution Park. It's over 2 days and it's ready.
You brought up the interesting point though about, prepping for opening up the facility. And what do you, kind of bring it to bear with dates and stuff and all that? How close is it all that?
Well, the completion date right now stands in March. The fact that, hopefully, we're probably gonna be in that building weeks prior to opening, learning everything there is to know about it. And setting schedules when we open the door and the grand opening. I mean, we're gonna have to be able to handle 1,000 people on that grand opening, I guarantee you.
So yeah, with the question that I deal with it weekly with people not showing up, things being weekly from out of state or even in state, so I'm a little cautious right now. If we can people and stuff, spend all the money. What, do we lose revenue?
Revenues
I'm not losing any, just the joy of the whole.
So what's our lease on Paradise Park?
September 8th.
So I'll be able to compare with the smaller version, just cut these out.
Well, we still have
No,
chili cook-off.
we have chili cook-off.
Okay, sure.
Greg, I have a question for you. Because if you did it at Constitution Park, we would have vendors in there. Does that give you a little more control over how the placement and the routine, whether we're in a stronger COVID policy, let's say, versus if we did a large scale at Tequesta Park? Which one gives you a little more room to mold?
What's the park prepared?
Paradise Park or
Well,
Constitution Park?
it's a lot easier to put an event on at Paradise Park because of just its open canvas. Easy to bring trucks in, you can set vendors up. It's wonderful experience. Constitution Park is a whole other. There's a lot of juggling, people coming, bringing stuff in. You're talking about semis coming in Constitution Park.
Well, you wouldn't be able to bring what we have.
Well, we do, we can bring in 2 of the large scale rides in Constitution Park. I have it planned.
Are they rides that are geared mostly towards little kids, or is it kind of teens
Like I
too?
always do, it's like people.
Double wheel, Ferris wheel.
Yeah. Well, I can't sit on those spinny things.
But this will be the last, if we do the big one at Paradise Park, literally this will be the last year we don't buy it. So at some point, it's it's gonna transition over into something else that we have not offered. The great thing about what we did last year is we did it at Constitution Park, we did a scaled down version. It ran really smooth. It smooth.
It's not, too.
Yeah, I mean, depends on who you ask, but I think most of your residents were extremely satisfied with what we did.
We're recommending the scaled down version, obviously, because of COVID, we'll continue to monitor that to see, make sure that we have it, but that's our recommendation at this point.
Okay, so let's pull on this one more time. I have no problem with this one. Okay, and I'm in favor. What is it?
I can go either way. And my hesitancy on the large, I'd love to do one last big hurrah. But like Greg said, I am very aware that a lot of inconsistencies on whether people can show up on time, what they're coming with, if they can bring enough people to service what they're gonna be running. That's what makes me really uneasy, not to mention the cost, but I would love to do a big hurrah. I can go for money. And I know that if we did the Constitution Park version, it's gonna be better than what it was last year, because one, they've already done it.
Yeah.
And they know what they wanna maybe tweak or add or change and make it even, you can top yourself every year, right?
Well, if we have a consensus on this,
Yeah.
we can move forward. So we have
Okay.
four signing.
I can go either
Go
way.
small. So you're okay
I can
going
go either
small?
way.
So for me, it's about the budget, you know, I want to be able to move forward with the budget so we can go forward. If it's a $45,000 budget, for me, a $35,000, we put more towards sidewalks or something. We'll look at all of our needs and what all of our requests were and go back to the drawing board with the extra funding that we have. And so that's why it's important to kind of get this direction.
We have a consensus now. Go small.
So with that, I don't, obviously you guys have all the initiatives. You guys may have other questions. We have department heads here if you guys want to ask questions, but, I think that that was my attempt to try and bring out some of the topics that have come up. And, I feel like we have a balanced budget that I think staff, we've worked with staff and we feel like we have a good budget moving forward.
Okay. Final comments?
I have a question.
Absolutely.
On strategic DQ. May have been done already, because you guys are always super thorough, but with the, tree, has the layout and the tree location been vetted in regards to utilities or structures being in place that plan for?
So, and I'll work a little bit closer with like Mr. Bradford, but I believe in that plan, there was quite a few areas that a tree had died or we're trying to replace a tree, that there was a tree there in the past, but we haven't fully vetted that process. You guys had that in your packet, I believe. So we haven't vetted that, but we will. That's actually for 2 years away, so it's
Right,
not
yeah.
next year's budget. So I got a little bit of time to still vet that
I just
project.
asked because I want to be getting that next year.
Noted.
and then the following
Well,
year.
yeah.
Then, on SB4, carbon footprint, I know they're looking into the race to the road thing. Is there any, I think it might have just been on the agenda, I'm sorry, if there's anything planned for there, think about how.
Do they talk about that at all?
Say it again.
So-
Read that.
I know Mr. Brad, and I was in there on the conversation, Mr. Bradford brought it up as a conversation about the race for reducing carbon or having some kind of actionable, measurable item from the EAC. Did they just put it out for discussion, come back later?
Yeah, they they don't have any actionable items to bring to council. I know they're all in favor of any decrease it.
What she's referring to is that I worked with Mr. Bradford. There's a whole thing with a lot of bigger cities, like a race for zero, like carbon footprint. Obviously there's $1 million impacts to budgets for that. So I told him, like, look, we don't necessarily need, those large scale things, but maybe the EAC can work on something that's very measurable that we can do, whether it's, the number of trees that we plant throughout the year. So that way we can work on, is it number of houses that meet or exceed the green standards, you know, and measure something like that we can come up and maybe even challenge some of the other communities. So while it won't have a huge impact to its budget, it's something very measurable that we can do from the village standpoint. So I know the EAC was kind of given that at their last meeting, and I'll follow up with them, and maybe there's some different things. And obviously, if you guys got any ideas with something like that, I'm sure that they would entertain those. And so they're going to try to hopefully help us come up with something that we can really start working toward that's measurable.
We have an Arbor Day.
Didn't we do a tree day last year?
We used to be in Arbor City.
Huh?
I'll put on my story. We used to be in Arbor City. There's a certain criteria that you've got. I mean, maybe and we used to have that designation.
I know Bradford knows that.
Oh, that,
Used to be a- oh, yeah. That's why he
Well, I think it's a great day.
looking
you
for
know,
the
to do
trees.
that.
I know, so just point over Greg, because I know that last year they gave out trees to citizens, anybody who came through. So we've done something like that. So I think, you know, looking for things like that, the environmental committee.
We did a whole park event, and there was we had dinners out there, we had planting our own trees, we did a bunch of stuff, and EAC wasn't there. And so I don't know what disconnect happened there. There was a full-on event. I remember.
I know a lot of places, it's a really big deal with stuff, I just couldn't recall it.
Right, live band.
Was there a band? Yeah, I knew there was vendors, but anyway, no one digress too far from the budget. But,
Bruce, you have anything else?
No, sure, I'm good, thank you.
Mom?
I'm good.
I got a couple things. In the beginning, one of your first slides, I'm just trying to understand how it worked. Did I see that the total increase in expenses is gonna be $6 million?
Yes.
And then I'm trying to understand where the revenue's coming from to cover that 6 million, when the American Rescue Plan is only 1.1.
Exactly.
We only get
Precise.
8% of total revenue increase, which is 1.1.
Yeah, you're correct.
So where is that other $4 million coming from?
The manager is going to.
you know, that's what you talked about.
I think that reference.
Yeah, the debt.
This is probably a good one. Is this a good slide to show?
That's it.
Okay.
Exactly.
So part of this is the debt service. So you'll see the big part of that is the debt service from the water utility fund. Now, we talked about, this is a recommendation that obviously to the pleasure of the council. The pleasure of the council decides not to borrow money. It changes the number, but that's where the big portion of that is the rescue funds and the water utility fund. And so the debt service, the proceeds recognized from that would offset that.
I know we all talked about trying to move forward as quickly as possible on the distribution system replacement. So I think this was in response to those plans and that desire.
So the other question is, I mean, we're obviously, we're a big family, and we just want to make sure that no department heads have any, like, issues with the current budget, that we're all in favor of being able to stand behind this and execute. Please speak up. Everyone's good? Awesome.
Anybody but you can talk.
I had a couple of things. It's not going to be for this, but the woman who came in at the council meeting talked about having an additional homestead exemption for seniors, low-income seniors, which I thought was really a great idea. So obviously it's not going to be effective this year, but I think that's something that at some point as we move forward, I'd like to see us discuss that. I know in certain places, for example, this is at the county level, you get to the 65 when you're exempt from school taxes, which helps the seniors stay in their home. So this is a much smaller action that we could take, but I think it's something that's worthy, of our consideration. The other thing I want to share with you, Jeremy and I both had conversations with Mr. Perko. The 300 building on Beach Road has been acquired. They are looking at developing that building. The saleable space that they're targeting would be 120,000 square feet. Based on what they perceive to be current pricing and current demand. And again, it's very early, obviously, but they're looking for sales volume somewhere between $220 to $240 million. Which, if they were to realize that, basically, the village share of the property tax revenue from that would exceed $1 million. They are going to take the same approach that they did with C-Class, which is they will begin to market it when they have 50 people who basically confirm interest in it if they want to buy. That would be their general plan to move forward. When I was up before League of Cities, I was speaking with some people, and I understand that C-Glass, believe it or not, has a waiting list of 40 potential buyers who are interested in acquiring it should they come on the market. So they obviously feel very strongly that there's demand and that there's interest there. He also indicated to me that he has reached an agreement with the homeowners, the board of the condo board, for the very next to last building on the right-hand side of Beach Road, right before you get to the Martin County line. That is a smaller building. It would be a smaller development. It is in unincorporated Palm Beach County, but he's indicated that if he goes through, because the next steps would obviously be reach an agreement with all the unit holders, he would be interested in the next again. Now that does pose some challenges because it's unincorporated, it's not contiguous, but there is an argument made that it would be a reduction in the enclave. So, you know, might be able to make an argument for that density to come in. But anyways, I just found out about all this actually when I was in Florida, League of Cities. I had somebody sit down with me and say, hey, are you up to speed on what's going on? And I said, I'm aware that there's been conversations, but I was not aware that it was a definitive agreement, but on 300 building drafts. So, yeah, we'll obviously hear more as the whole thing forward, but I did want to share that.
So willingly wanting to annex it.
Just to be part of the community.
There's a reason for it.
Yeah, there's a reason.
The county has more stringent when it comes to height. So, you know, obviously we allow more height as they get up, I forget, over like certain 50 feet, then they can only go up 1 per 1, or we don't have that same restriction. So that's the big portion of why they want to do it. Our code allows them to go to 101 feet without the different setbacks. So I think it's 101. Don't quote me on that.
I think there's still a setback, but it's not significant.
Right, but with their setbacks after 50 feet, then they have to go 1 foot for every 1 foot setback as they go up after 50 feet, something along those lines. So that's their trade-off with why they want that. So our code allows for it. The only other thing is that, you know, we had the 5-year capital. I didn't hear anything about that. You know, obviously when we approve budget, we want to make sure that we're approving that capital plan. Nothing else is, you know, changed. I think been consistent with this, and unless there's any comments, I know we've included stormwater and water. That'll be part of the budget when we bring it to you guys at the budget meeting. And, you know, we don't have anything tonight and we're done. We're going to move forward with a budget meeting. We won't have a meeting tomorrow, but that's your guys' discretion.
So, yeah, I think everybody is comfortable with this dispensing of tomorrow evening, just getting forward with the next budget.
We're going to make a couple minor changes that have been pointed out tonight, especially in the water fund. But for the most part, this is the budget that you'll see, you know, minus a couple of things that we'll talk about tonight.
Sounds good. Well, listen, Jeremy, thank you. Thank you, the whole staff. I think you guys have done an excellent job of putting the budget together, not only the operations side, but the capital side as well. I know we all very much appreciate the work that's gone into it. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to say one more thing. Again, I'm going to expound on that a little bit. Y'all did a great job, you know, putting together the presentation, the detail and stuff. I mean, just the way you even put it all in the format stuff that you did. I mean, y'all really did a great job stuff on it. Thanks to everyone in here, you know, for doing everything that I've done. So,
Michelle should get credit too. She's our person that crunched all the numbers. You see a workbook in there with just numbers and no colors? That's her.
That was great, I tell you, I like it.
Okay, now do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Like 9:30. Yeah.